we're told today that this is a secular, godless document. One of the books I love to point to is this book. These professors, what's the basis of their conclusions? Well, this is where you go to the back of the book. You go to the footnotes. See what it says here is a note on sources. See the note on sources right there? Here's the proof of why they say the Founding Fathers wanted a deliberately secular Constitution. The founders were themselves secular. Look what they tell us. They see here at the bottom, we have dispensed with the usual scholarly apparatus of footnotes.
After Barton has made all kinds of unsupported claims, now he points to a 1996 book that lacks footnotes to convince his audience that those who oppose him have no sources.
Not a single footnote in the book. But you can trust us. We're PhDs. We're professionals. We know what we're talking about. These guys.
As he usually does, he stops the quote before it gets to the good part. If you continue reading the very page that he's looking at, you'll see it starts a list of 2.5 pages of sources. Not footnotes, but the actual sources, where they got their information from. You're welcome to go to Amazon.com and look at pages 179 through 181 and see the sources for yourself.
Well, and by the way, do you know how many people were put to death in the witch trials? 27. Lasted 2 years, 27 people put to death, 27 people shouldn't have been put to death. But that's not the story of the witch trial.
I kind of think it is.
The story is how they came to an end. They came to an end when 3 Christian ministers, Reverend John Wise, Increase Mather, and Thomas Brattle.
He will keep on referring to these 3 ministers when only 2 are actually ministers. Whatever it takes to make it look more religious.
Those 3 went to Governor Phipps. They went to Governor William Phipps and said, Phipps, you have got to stop these trials. Look at the biblical rules of evidence. You're not following the rules of evidence. What rules of evidence? You're supposed to be able to confront your accuser.
The reason he keeps referring to the Geneva Bible here is because the so-called scriptures don't really list these rights. The 17th century commentary accompanying that Bible may have mentioned those rights. It doesn't really show you that, as Barton normally doesn't. But if they were really in the text of the Bible itself, he wouldn't have to keep referring to this one edition of the Bible. King James at this time considered this edition of the Bible seditious because of the things it said in the commentary, not what the text of the Bible said. In fact, this is the motive for his ordering his own King James version of the Bible. The text of the Bible itself does mention the right to confront your accuser in Acts 25. Now, I'm going to have some fun with this. Let's have a little multiple choice. In this chapter, the Apostle Paul is taken before the magistrate, where he asserts his right to confront his accusers. Now, question, what does he base this right on? Multiple choice. A, he's Jewish and the law of Moses gives him that right. Or B, he's Christian and the New Testament, which he's going to start writing pretty soon, will give him that right retroactively. Or C, he's a Roman citizen and the heathen Roman pagan law gives him that right. The correct answer is C. So in a strange way, the Bible does mention the right to confront your accusers, but it was a Roman right, not a Jewish Christian right.
And you see what was significant was this Geneva Bible. You remember all the commentaries on this Bible? This commentaries in this Geneva Bible was loaded up with right judicial process. As a matter of fact, if you'll go to the if you'll go to the Federal Practice and Procedure, volumes of books on how to practice law in federal courts. Volume 30 has probably 100 pages on how the Geneva Bible shaped the 4th through the 8th Amendments, almost specifically. The right to confront your accusers, the right to have an attorney, the right to call witnesses in your behalf, the right to have a jury trial. All of that came out of the Scriptures, and the commentaries pointed all that out.
Of course, the Bible had nothing to do with there being witch trials to begin with. Exodus 22:18, King James Bible, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live."
Now, significantly, that's the due process clauses, and that's what these 3 ministers pointed out to William Phipps was not happening. You aren't following due process.
Once again, that's 3 ministers? No. 2 ministers, 1 is not. And everything I read about them says that what they did was to question the use of spectral evidence, that is, evidence from visions and dreams. While Barton claims that this is about due process spelled out in the Bible, in fact, the Bible constantly uses dreams and visions to reveal the truth from God. In Barton's topsy-turvy world, the rights of the accused come from the Bible, when in fact the right of the Apostle Paul to confront his accuser was Roman law. Remember, it was the Apostle Paul who had a vision that made him a Christian. What these three men opposed in the witch trials was the use of visions as evidence.
27 people put to death in America. Did you know witch trials were happening across the world at the same time? You know how many people were put to death in the European witch trials? 500,000 put to death.
Everything I've read on the witch trials in Europe says 40,000 to 60,000 were killed there, mostly during the religious wars, 1/10 of Barton's figure. He exaggerates the number apparently to suggest that it was America's familiarity with the Scripture that stopped the witch trials here. Apparently, Europeans didn't have Bibles, except of course they did, and their scriptures in every language translation mentioned witches. It's a remarkable ability of David Barton that he can see the goodness of his religion even in the witch trials. But let's get our facts straight. The actual words of the Bible in any language tell us not to allow a witch to live. Even in David Barton's cherry-picked half-truths, it would be the more modern 17th century commentary on the Scriptures that stopped the slaughter in America, if there is any truth to what he says.
Indian lands, Indian treaties, we will always point out in our textbooks that settlers stole the land. That's what they did, came here and took it from the Indians. No, not accurate at all. Matter of fact, the Pilgrims bought every piece of land they had from the Indians. They wouldn't go on it if they couldn't buy it. I mean, they wouldn't live on it if they couldn't buy it. They have title. They had the longest lasting treaty with Native Americans of any people in the early colonies because they wouldn't take anything unless they could buy it.
He points out different cases where the settlers did indeed buy rather than steal land from the natives, as if that proved that settlers never stole land throughout the entire continent.
The entire state of Connecticut was purchased from the Indians at the price set by the Indians. Same thing happened when you got to Rhode Island. Roger Williams, he purchased it all from the Indians, would only let his people live where they had purchased land, wouldn't let them take land from the Indians, had to purchase it. Now this is not what the secular colonists did, but this is what the Christian colonists did.
No explanation as to how he knows that secularists didn't pay for their land and Christians did. I suspect Jesus may have told him in a dream or a vision.
Probably 70% of the Founding Fathers were abolitionists. What happens today is we hear about, how come we hear about the few Founding Fathers who owned slaves and not the many who didn't?
We started this part 4 with him complaining that other people weren't giving references for the claims they made, and here he makes one more claim without any reference to where he comes up with that number.
Of the 56 guys who signed the Declaration of Independence, 29 of these guys held today what we call seminary or Bible school degrees, which is not bad for a bunch of atheists to have Bible school degrees. Apparently that's what they did back there.
This is one of his favorite lies. The fact is there were 2 ministers who signed the Declaration of Independence. That means there were 12 times as many lawyers as ministers signing the Declaration. The term seminary back in the late 18th, early 19th centuries meant a school. I've gone over this in a previous video, and you can look at that for more detail. I don't really understand why Barton continues to mislead people, and I'm astonished that people still believe him.
There is a demonic spirit of lying